Good evening, universe, and hello again. It has been a little while, but I'm excited to be back. I had some kind of intense stuff going on in my life. School got really a lot, and I had a lot going on in my personal life, and my mental health wasn't doing so good, but I am feeling a little bit better now. Well, a lot better now, and still working on getting it perfect, but like I said, much improved, so I'm definitely feeling grateful for that. And school is still super intense. There are so many assignments that I have to do, but I'm doing this instead. So I'm going to start by talking about the books that I read in my absence. For a while, I wasn't really reading too much because of my mental health difficulties, and so there wasn't really much to report on anyway. But while I was gone, I did read a good number of books, and I'm excited to talk about them. One of my classes for school is a service to middle grade, essentially. So we become an expert in middle grade by reading 30 books, which obviously is a tiny amount compared to the actual amount of middle grade out there. But it's to give like a snapshot. You're supposed to read widely and increase your general knowledge. For that class, I've been reading a lot of middle grade. So as we get into August, a lot of the books are going to be middle grade, but I'm still excited to talk about them. Let's get into it. So back in July, I read Peter Darling by Austen Chant. This is a short fantasy novel. It's not exactly a retelling, more like a reimagining and slash sequel to Peter Pan. And it follows Peter as well as Captain Hook. Basically, Peter goes back to Neverland and discovers that nobody really misses him. The Lost Boys don't really seem to need him, and Neverland is getting along just fine without him, except for Captain Hook. This is a story about their dynamic, and it also explores more of Peter, in this new version of him. And I really enjoyed this. This includes a trans character, and I thought that was done really well. I really enjoyed it. I loved the dynamic between Peter and Hook. Loved the exploration of both of their characters, as well as the world building for Neverland. I thought Tinkerbell was really interesting because she's in here too. The Lost Boys, and basically all of the Neverland parts I really loved. I thought it was quick and enjoyable. It sort of had a cozy vibe to me where you just kind of like sink into it and enjoy it. So I thought this was really great overall, and I'm glad that I read it. The next book I read was You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus. This is, I think, the fourth book I've read by her, or at least the fourth book I've completed. So I've read One of Us is Lying, Two Can Keep a Secret, One of Us is Next, and now this one, You'll Be the Death of Me. For the most part, I really enjoyed those other three that I mentioned, but I also tried reading The Cousins, and I wasn't really enjoying that, so I DNF'd it. And this one I did complete, but I didn't really enjoy it that much. I couldn't really connect with the three main characters. The mystery was pretty interesting, but it wasn't as compelling as I think some of her other mysteries. It didn't have quite as much tension. So the premise is that there are these three high schoolers who used to be best friends after they had like an amazing day all together. This is like sporadic day where they had a bunch of adventures and they were best friends from then on. And then a couple of years later, they had a falling out and fell apart and were no longer friends. And now this is a couple of years after that. So one of them gets the idea to try and recreate what they called the best day ever, that day that they had so many adventures together. But instead of that, they come across a dead body. So this is about the story of figuring out who killed the person that they found, because the person is a fellow student. And so this story is about finding out who is responsible for this person's murder. Like I said, this one didn't really work for me. The characters, I just didn't find them very interesting or likable. I didn't really connect with them. I liked one of them okay, but the other two I wasn't really feeling. And if 2/3 of the book is like not really hooking you, I don't really consider that too much of a success. I will be reading One of Us is Back because I really enjoy that series, and I'm excited to see the conclusion to that trilogy. Okay, I had some technical difficulties just now, so I apologize if there's a weird cut at all, But the next thing that I ended up reading was I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jennette McCurdy. This is one of those books that was extremely popular, and you have probably already heard of it. If not, though, it is a memoir written by Jennette McCurdy, who once starred in iCarly. She was like the main character's best friend, I think, and now she's a writer. I never watched that show, so I don't really have background information on it, but I was interested in this book and I happened to see it at the library, so I went ahead and picked it up. And this basically is about her life as a child star and the very difficult relationship that she has with her mother, the abusive, toxic dynamic that they have. So I really enjoyed this book. It was very emotional for me. It has a kind of dark humor to it as well, and the writing is extremely accessible, very readable, and so that was really enjoyable, but it was very I wanted to keep reading it, but also every chapter had a different gut punch. I think it was incredibly well done. I read it over the course of a day and a half. I did not really cry because I was on a train for most of it and I didn't want to cry in front of people. So I held it in, but it was very sad, very heartbreaking, and in many ways a very difficult read. So I would recommend not binging it like I did. No, going into it, it does have an abusive relationship between a parent and a child. It also has a lot of discussion of eating disorders and a lot of really heavy topics, so keep that in mind going into it. However, I do think it was really well done, and I guess you could say I enjoyed it in the saddest way possible. But I think it was great overall, and it definitely was emotional. Also, a lot to take in. She's clearly a very talented writer, and I'm really excited to see what she does next. So that was it for July. Next, in August, I read another extremely popular book, Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This is another one that I feel like if you are on BookTube at all, you have probably heard of this book, but just in case you haven't, this is basically about a writer whose friend, who is also a writer. Our main character's name is June. Her friend's name is Athena. June happens to be around when Athena dies during a freak accident. And Athena has written a book in secret. Athena has been a very popular writer so far, whereas June has been a not so popular writer. But Athena has completed a manuscript in secret, except she told June about it. So when Athena dies, June takes it. And then she starts editing it and she passes it off as her own work. So the book is basically about her justifying all of her actions and getting further and further into this lie. Hello, I was just editing this and I realized that there were a couple of critical elements to Yellowface that I had completely failed to mention. So I wanted to add on to that really quick just to make it really clear what this book is about. The first thing is that Yellowface is entirely a satire. So the whole thing is satirical. It also harshly critiques absolutely everything that exists inside of it, especially the main character as well as the publishing industry. So that's the tone. Also, to clarify a dynamic between the main character, June, and Athena, June is white and Athena is Chinese American, and her manuscript is about Chinese laborers in World War I and their lives. And so when June presents this manuscript as her own, she gets some raised eyebrows that are kind of like, well, this isn't, own voices or anything like that. Are you really the person to be telling this story? People might ask about that. And so June starts going by her first and middle name, which is Juniper Song. And she takes photos in really ambiguous lighting. So she doesn't directly lie about her identity, but she does deceive people intentionally and sort of take possession of many things that are not hers. And that is a central conflict of the story, hence the title of the book. And I realized that I hadn't touched on that at all in my previous description, so I just wanted to clear that up. I moderately enjoyed this. I didn't love it, mostly because I didn't really like any of the characters. My favorite character was Athena, and because she dies at the beginning of the book, that made it difficult for me. to enjoy the rest of the story. I did like the dive into June's psyche overall and the look at publishing. I thought that was fantastic and really fascinating. But overall, I just liked this okay. This wasn't my favorite, and it definitely wasn't the worst, but I wasn't blown away by it or anything like that. Next, I read The Chance to Fly by Ali Stroker and Stacy Davidowitz. This was the first book for my middle grade class that I mentioned earlier, and it is basically about a young girl who is a wheelchair user, and she absolutely loves theater productions. She loves musicals. She's never been to see a musical, but she listens to all of the soundtracks. So she really wants to be in a theater production. She is moving to a new town, and there is basically an opportunity at this town for her to possibly be in a production of Wicked. And so she wants to play Nessa Rose because that character is in a wheelchair. She feels like she has a chance to be that character because that representation is already there. There are some problems that come up with this. If you have seen the musical Wicked, you might know what the problem is. But if not, I'm not going to spoil it for you because I didn't know going into it what the problem was going to be, and that was a fun twist. There's a little bit of romance. This is middle grade, so the romance is very light and cute. It's a pretty funny book. It was very engaging, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought it was super fun. I highly recommend it. Next, I read The Mystery of Black Hollow Lane by Julia Nobel, and I did not enjoy this one as much. This is about a young girl who goes away to a boarding school, and she learns that her father went to the same boarding school as she did, and there are a lot of mysteries surrounding her father. So she is really intrigued, and she thinks this is maybe a chance to learn a little bit about his past. So this is a mystery, and it's about that. And also secret societies are in there. I didn't really care for any of the characters, and the plot didn't really propel me along very well. So I would say this one was kind of boring, and I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for a middle grade mystery. Next, I read Star-Crossed by Barbara Dee. This is about a young girl who is in a production of Romeo and Juliet through her class, a class play. And she has to deal with figuring out friendships and relationships. This is primarily a romance, and she starts getting interesting feelings for actually another girl, and she has to sort that out. So I really liked this. I thought it was super cute and fun, a really good look at the concept of starting to figure out that one's sexuality might not just be heterosexual. Looking at that, I thought it was really great representation, and I thought it was a fun book besides that. Finally, I read Grow Up, Talia Wilkins by Karina Evans. And this is about a young girl, once again, who gets her period for the first time while her mom is away on a business trip. So she's stuck at home with her dad and brothers, and she is absolutely horrified by this. She is so embarrassed. Basically, this is a comedy of errors while she tries to get through this mess on her own without involving her dad or her brothers in this situation. It was cute and funny. The main character is pretty unlikable, so be prepared for that. But there was a lot of charm to it, and this was more of a humor book, and I do think it is pretty funny. Just the amount of embarrassment and what she will do to avoid having to tell her father about her situation was pretty funny and somewhat relatable, and I moderately enjoyed this one. I would say it's okay. Wouldn't be my first to recommend, but certainly wouldn't be the lowest on my list either. So those were all the books I read in July and August. My plan is to make another video covering everything I read in September and October, because even though it's kind of in the past, I'm still excited to talk about these books. So I'm going to be doing catch up for a couple of weeks, but then hopefully in December, I'll have a wrap up for you for November, and I will get back on top of things. I hope your reads have been good over the course of, the last couple of months. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great night, universe.